Walk like me?
Nah, they can't walk like us.
Take a walk with me though. Walk like an Egyptian. Yeah.
They say the Nile gave us Egypt. Try planting crops on the beach, and you can believe it. The yearly flood left rich dirt called silt, so they planted in the silt. And the farms got built around the Nile.
Dancing around like an Egyptian. Oh, we should study ancient Egypt today. Good idea, absolutely. My name is Katie bidelSPOT, and I'm happy to be with you from the bidelSPOT to go over ancient Egypt with you today. Those of you who are interested in looking at this might pertain to middle school or high school students taking a global studies or a world studies class. I'm coming to you from the Empire State of New York today. So if you're going to be taking a global regions review at the end of your sophomore year, this would be a great review. Or for those of you in 9th grade in New York State, it's a really good lesson for those of you who are taking a study on ancient Egypt right now. So what we're going to do today is kind of go over some basic stuff, as well as get into some timeline, kind of where Egypt starts and ends. So hopefully it'll be a really good study. So sit back and relax and enjoy yourself. We're going to try to do this in under 20 minutes. So here we go, ancient Egypt. So the first thing we might think about, what do you know about ancient Egypt? Well, you probably know more than you realize. You probably have heard of the Sphinx. You've probably heard of King Tut, King Tutankhamun. You've probably heard of the Great Pyramids of Giza. And you may even know about the Valley of the Kings. So you might already know some stuff about ancient Egypt, but now we want to know why they're there, how they got there. So what we're going to look at is we want to think about how they're different than the Sumerians. Okay, if that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, I have a video on the Sumerians and Mesopotamia under my civilizations section. So check that out if you want to learn a little more about the Sumerians. First of all, we want to know that Egypt was a land of culture and ethics and racial diversity throughout its 3,000-year history. Wow, that's a long time. So we want to know about what is the most important geographic feature in ancient Egypt. The most important thing is the Nile River. Okay, the Nile River flows, it starts, I think I have to go this direction, it starts in southern Egypt. It starts down and it flows north to the Mediterranean Sea. I have another video. If I got one of those boxes, if I figure out how to do that, it'll be around my face right now, that you can watch on the Nile River. So check that out to get a little more detail on the Nile River. But the Nile River flows from the south to the north. Okay, the northern section is referred to as Lower Egypt, and the southern section is referred to as Upper Egypt, because again, the way the river flows in a different direction than we normally think about. Okay, it's all backwards. So what we also want to look at is the beginning of ancient Egypt and the people who kind of helped create it. About 6,000 years BC or BCE is when we first start to see the first inhabitants settling around the Nile River. The Nile River is going to be the life flow of Egypt. In about 3,100 BC, we have a king of Upper Egypt named is Menses. And he unites Upper and Lower Egypt. And one of the ways that he unites, or shows his uniting, is through a crown. I'm going to show you a picture of that in a second. And he makes Memphis the capital of his city, of his area. So the king is the king. Think about it. Pharaohs are different than what we saw in Mesopotamia, because pharaohs are gods. They're not gods, people on earth. They are gods. They're living gods. They're not just someone who's acting through God. They are the God. And pharaohs are the center of Egyptians' religion, government, and their army. This is the main thing. You're not going to cross paths with an Egyptian pharaoh. They are the ultimate absolute ruler. Absolute ruler. We're going to see that word a little later on in our global history studies. Absolute ruler. But they've got all the control, super control for these kings. The Egyptians study what we call hieroglyphics. You probably heard of that before. It's a form of Egyptian writing based on pictures. Okay, these are some examples that we see. And how in the world, when you look at that, how did anyone figure out that like a bird means A, or, uppercase A, lowercase, how did they figure that out? Well, they were able to use something called the Rosetta Stone. Okay, and the Rosetta Stone was a cipher. It showed us how, what the words meant. There were 3 different languages on it, and it showed us which one, like what each meant. So that's how we were able to figure out what the hieroglyphics mean. And this is basically the only surviving Rosetta Stone that we have. I believe you can go check it out. I think it's in England, I believe. I could be wrong. It's either in England or in Cairo, Egypt. I should check that out and put a little thought bubble there to give you the answer. So the social classes, we see this pyramid a lot as we do our studies, okay? We're going to see slaves and servants. At the bottom, our lower class being unskilled laborers and farmers. Our middle class will be merchants, manufacturers, and artisans. Our upper class, we're getting our royal families, the landowners, the government officials, the priests, and at the very end, the top, the very fewest people, we have our pharaohs, okay? Again, the pharaoh is God. So, is a god. This is a group of people that they have more than one god. But a pharaoh will be one of those gods. And at the bottom, we said that we have our slaves in the New Kingdom. So when Menzies unites the Old and New Kingdom, he actually takes 2 crowns and combines them together. So you see the white crown there represents Upper Egypt. That red crown is symbolizing Lower Egypt, and he combines those 2 together to symbolize Upper and Lower Egypt together, united as one. And Menzies and his family rule for a length of time. And that is referred to as a dynasty. So when one family rules, that is a dynasty. And ancient Egypt actually consists of about 31 dynasties that are going to span about 2,800 years. So the pharaoh is immortal, meaning that the pharaoh will never truly really die. That he continues to rule after his physical death, and that he has an eternal spirit referred to as the Ka. Ka-ka, ka-ka. Okay, so you can always keep that in mind. Ka-ka, ka-ka. It's a spirit forever around. It's Ka. Okay, and he will be taking part, or he or she will be taking part in the government through their eternal Ka-ka. Egyptians also believed that the Ka needed, that in order to remain present, the Ka needs pleasures. So in death, the pharaoh needs other things. So a pharaoh's tomb needs to consist of decorative walls that would include endless meals and loved ones and servants. They're going to need fine jewelry and board games and clothing. They're going to need inscriptions about how wonderful they are. Should be written all around the tomb in case the pharaoh forgets in their afterlife how wonderful they were. So that's what all the stuff they're going to need around them. And this is placed, all this stuff that they need is going to be placed inside of pyramids. So these pyramids the Old Kingdom is going to be a great age for Egyptian pyramid builders. And this would be, where they would reign forever. And their tombs, the pyramids themselves, are going to be more important to them than their actual palaces on earth, because their tombs will be forever. Forever, 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 and always. where their palaces will only be for their mortal lives, their lives that we think of. So there's a couple main pyramids. This is the Pyramid of Giza, possibly the most famous pyramid out there. And it was made from bricks that were about 2.5 tons. Some of them weighed up to 15 tons, so very, very big. These were built by peasant workers, and there's still about 80 pyramids left. I do want you guys to take note, no Hebrew slaves building these. Okay, that's kind of a fallacy. It doesn't, I'm sure I'll get some comments about that. It doesn't line up with biblical stories as far as like the pyramids of Giza. But these were made by servants and peasants, not by Hebrew slaves. And there's what we see today. And you can see the pyramids of Giza, how big they are, especially when you can actually see the Sphinx kind of in the middle there. Move out of the way. So you can see the Sphinx, and the Sphinx is huge, and look at how small the Sphinx looks in comparison to those giant pyramids. Okay, so what we'd actually see here, this is kind of how it would look kind of from the inside. I have never gotten the opportunity to go and see a pyramid, so I don't have great personal experience in here, but what we see, there's different ways of getting there, and the king would actually be somewhere near the center, and there's different, as you can see too, there's a lining with the stars that would be important. So very, 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 very interesting on how this is done. So how does kind of Egypt kind of start to decline or change? So the Old Kingdom first comes to an end when the power of the pharaohs starts to decline, because more power was falling onto the nobles and the officials. Local rulers started to struggle for power, and ultimately Egypt is torn apart by a civil war. What we then start to see is in the Middle Kingdom, the royal power returns, but we're starting to see slight differences. So in the past, in the Old Kingdom, we saw that the pharaohs were the ones who were worthy of a proper afterlife. But we're seeing in the Middle Kingdom is that that everyone feels that they should have a good afterlife. So law and order is returned to Egypt. Farming is revived. Trade begins to grow. The arts are flourishing. The capital moves from Memphis to Thebes. Public projects were created, and we start to see everyone getting these fancy tombs or being mummified, for their eternity. But there's another illness that comes about and brings ruin again. We get another civil war that breaks out. Egypt becomes prey to outsiders who are coming in and attacking them. And the Hyksos come. They're Asian nomads. They start to come on over, and they start to rule Egypt. And they're there from about 1640 to 1570 BC. The Egyptians hate having the Hyksos there. But they bring lots of really great things to the Egyptians, things that they become very well known for. The ability to make bronze for tools and weapons. They had been using copper. They bring the horse-drawn chariot, which is really helpful for war, and they also bring new powerful types of bows and new spinning and weaving techniques. So then we get our new kingdom, kind of the most recent, that also referred to as the Age of Empires or Emperors, about 1570 to 1075 BCE. Okay, and this is where we're going to see some of our most well-known Egyptian rulers. This is more powerful, more wealthy than ever before. We have King Tutankhamun, who rules at this time period. Egyptians become the conquerors instead of conquered. And we're seeing professional armies, which include bowmen, charioteers, and infantry. So they're having a really powerful army. This is the tomb of King Tutankhamun. Students with me will be studying this a little bit more in class. We also see Hatshepsut, Queen Hatshepsut, who is a woman. She is not she's not the only female leader of Egypt, but the most well-known female leader of Egypt. I do, suggest that if you would like, if you're interested in this, please go into some history and you'll find several more women who take this over. But Queen Hatshepsut declares herself pharaoh because her stepson was actually too young to rule. She declares herself queen. She rules for 22 years. And she was more of a trader than a warrior, which was actually extremely very good. This is her mummy. And we're going to find out, again, some of my students, we're going to be working together to find out more about what actually happened to Hatshepsut. How did she die? Was it a natural death, or was she murdered? Ooh. And she, like I said, she was one of many female rulers, and hers was the longest reign as far as female rulers go. And there she is there at the Valley of the Queens, or the Valley of the Kings. She had carved scenes at her great funeral tomb. She's buried with myrrh and frankincense and ebony and ivory and leopard skins. And one of the reasons that this is important is it shows how far-reaching her trade expansion went, because to have all that stuff, she clearly was going a lot of places to have all that in her tomb. And like I mentioned, she may have been murdered by her stepson, Thutmose III. And then we want to look at Ramses. Thutmose III. And he was way more warlike than his mother, her stepmother. If you go through this, you're going to see this interweaving web of mother, stepmother, sister, brother, all that sort of stuff going on. So Thutmose was from about 1450 to 1425 BC. He had 15 invasions that reached from Palestine to Syria. Wow, I feel like we're still at war in Palestine and Syria. Oh, we are. This section of the world seems to struggle a lot. And he actually reaches all the way into Nubia, which is in Africa, and he returns with thousands of slaves. And here's some images from his tomb. And there's his mummified head. And ultimately, the Egyptians meet up with the Hittites in about 1300 BC. And this is where they really struggle. They end up making a treaty that has peace and brotherhood between them forever, as we talked about. This is an area of the world that is in a warlike state all the time. You've got Israel, and we're not really in Iraq here, and Turkey. We're in Egypt. These are the problem areas up until today. So clearly, we don't get peace forever. And for centuries, the Hittites and the Egyptians would be unified. So this age was also the age of the builders. So the age of the emperors was also the age of the builders. And what they did, this is a different time than we're seeing the pyramids. We're seeing an area like what we're seeing here on the screen. And it's a little less noticeable that the tombs and such are there because they were so concerned about stealing. They were too easily robbed. The pyramids were really obvious that there would be great precious things in there. So this is the Valley of the Kings, which is way less noticeable. So their tombs are actually buried beneath the desert. And this is where we found King Tutankhamun. I had nothing to do with this. I did not find him. Be pretty cool if I did, but I didn't. So it's it's way less noticeable. There it is. There's the Valley of the Kings. So deep inside those mountains is where we see King Tutankhamun. And then our next person we're looking at is Ramses II, and Ramses II is considered kind of the greatest ruler of the New Kingdom. He rules for 65 years. He's like 99 years old when he dies. He has 150 children. He has obviously more than one wife. He's got some great temples, and he is the chief god. He builds huge, his buildings were huge and impressive, but they're not nearly as skilled as those from the Old Kingdom. And this is the Great Temple of Ramses. It is pretty cool. So it's huge. It's not constructed as well is what I'm saying here for the Great Temple of Ramses. Like I said, 65 years, lived well into his 80s, possibly up to 99. We can tell this because of his mummy. So, and you can even see he looks like an old man in this mummy. We could see arthritis and abscesses in his teeth and things like that. So that's how they were able to kind of make some guesses on how old he was. And this is Akhman. And then we see Egypt's power declining in 1200 BCE, and it's destroying many kingdoms. The Egyptians were attacked by the people of the sea, and didn't go well. Both the Egyptians and the Hittite kingdoms ultimately fell to this mysterious enemy, the people of the sea. And in 1671, the Assyrians took over Egypt and then we have the Persians coming in later on to conquer the rest of Egypt. So that is our lesson on ancient Egypt for today. I hope that you've enjoyed it. So a couple key things that we talked about. We talked about the importance of the Nile River. We talked about the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom of Egypt. We talked about pyramids. We talked about the Valley of the Kings and how the pyramids were built for the afterlife for kings, but they were too noticeable for robberies and such, so that they started to move into places like the Valley of the Kings, where the kings and the pharaohs were buried a little more secretively with all their goodies there. We looked at kings and queens of Egypt. We talked about improvements that were brought in by different groups that came in that improved Egyptian skills and technology, like weaponry and chariots and bronze. So. And then we looked at some mummies, some major players. We talked about King Tutankhamun. We talked about Hatshepsut. We talked about Ramses II. And those are the main things that we looked at. I hope you've enjoyed this brief study of ancient Egypt. And if you enjoyed this, please make sure you subscribe below. And if you have any questions or comments, please include that. Also, I will link to my website.
And that one God was the sun god, and that he as Pharaoh was the son of the sun god.
All right, thank you very much, and have a great day. And as always, thanks for learning.